All right, let's talk about something we all think we have a handle on, DDoS attacks. We plan for them, right? But what if the disaster isn't just a flood of traffic? What if it's something bigger? Something that takes out an entire geographic region?
I mean, just let that sink in for a sec. Your DDoS protection is doing its thing. Everything looks green, but then some massive event, a natural disaster, a huge power grid failure, and a whole Azure region just disappears from the map. Think about that. Your online store vanishes on Black Friday. Your most critical app is just gone. That is the scenario we're diving into today.
Okay, so before we jump into that big, scary regional disaster, let's talk about the first line of defense that Azure already gives you. For those smaller, more localized hiccups, Azure has this really powerful system baked right in. And you know what the best part is? It just works, automatically.
And the magic behind this is something called availability zones. Now, it's super important to understand, these are not just different server racks in the same building. A much better way to think of it is like separate, totally self-sufficient buildings on a huge college campus. Each one's got its own power, its own cooling, its own network. So if one building has a major issue, the others just keep on humming along completely unaffected. And this, right here, this is the easy part. Because Azure DDoS Protection is built on top of this system, it is zone redundant by default. Microsoft handles all of this. If one of those zones goes down, your protection just seamlessly fails over to another one. You don't have to configure anything. It's just done for you.
But what if it's not just one zone that fails? What happens when the problem is so big that the entire region, the whole campus, is offline? Well, this is where our job begins. And trust me, it's a much bigger challenge.
This brings us to a core idea in the cloud, the shared responsibility model. I like to think of it like a bank vault. Microsoft builds the incredibly secure Fort Knox-level vault. That's the baseline infrastructure. But you are still responsible for having a plan to get into your own safety deposit box if something goes wrong. For most services, Azure isn't automatically copying your stuff to another region. That part's on you.
So when it comes to building out your disaster recovery plan, you've basically got two main paths you can go down. And this is a really critical decision point. So let's break down your options. Are you going to be reactive or are you going to be proactive?
So on one side, you have the reactive plan. This is where you wait for the disaster to hit, and then you start scrambling to rebuild everything from the ground up in a different, healthy region. On the other side, you've got the proactive plan. This is where you've already built a duplicate standby environment that's just sitting there in another region waiting to be activated.
Let's take a closer look at that reactive approach. So the region goes down. Now you're in crisis mode, right? You're making API calls, trying to spin up a new virtual network, redeploying all your resources. But here's the massive, terrifying risk. In a huge disaster, you might not even be able to access the configuration data from that primary region, so you might not even know what you're supposed to be rebuilding. You could literally be flying blind. Now, compare that with the proactive approach. It's a whole different world. You've already done the hard work. You have two identical networks in two different regions, ready to go. You're using something like Traffic Manager to intelligently send all your users to the active one. When a disaster hits, you don't rebuild. You just fail over. You basically just connect your on-prem network to the standby VNet, and you're back in business. That huge risk of not knowing what to build, it's completely gone.
And this table really lays out the trade-offs perfectly. The reactive plan, sure, it's low on upfront preparation, but the risk is sky high, and your recovery is going to be painfully slow. The proactive plan, yeah, it's more work up front, no question, but your risk is low and your recovery is way, way faster. Which one you pick really comes down to one question. How much downtime can your business actually afford?
And that really brings us to the bottom line here. Azure gives you this incredibly resilient platform with all these amazing tools, but they can't create your disaster recovery plan for you. Ultimately, the responsibility for your workload's survival, well, that rests on your shoulders.
So think of this as your personal checklist. First, design your application to support disaster recovery from day one. Don't make it an afterthought. Second, create a DR plan. And this is the most important part, test it. A plan you've never tested is just a wish. Third, you have to consciously choose and implement your strategy, reactive or proactive. And finally, remember, this isn't just about networks. For most platform services, your databases, your storage, you have to set up that cross-region replication yourself. So I'll just leave you with this final thought. Microsoft has given you the zone redundancy, the global network, all the tools you need to build a system that can withstand almost anything. The real question is, have you done your part? Is your disaster plan truly ready for that worst-case scenario?